Maria walked into the Grand Windsor Hotel at exactly 6 in the morning like she had done every day for the past 8 years. She carried her small bag with cleaning supplies and her worn-out shoes made soft sounds on the marble floor. The hotel was quiet at this hour, with only a few early guests moving around and the night staff getting ready to leave. She had worked as a housekeeper here since Sophia was just 4 years old. Back then, Maria would leave her daughter with Mrs. Chun next door, but as Sophia got older and started school, Maria found it harder to pay for after-school care. The hotel manager, Mr. Rodriguez, understood her situation and allowed Sophia to wait in the employee break room after school until Maria finished work. It was not the best solution, but it was better than leaving a young girl alone at home. Sophia was now 12 years old and very different from other kids her age. While most children played video games or watched cartoons, Sophia was drawn to something else entirely. Every day when she walked through the hotel lobby with her mother, she would stop and look at the beautiful grand piano that sat in the center of the room. The piano was black and shiny, and when the afternoon light came through the big windows, it seemed to glow. The piano had been in the hotel lobby for 15 years. It was a Steinway baby grand that cost more money than Maria made in 2 years. Hotel guests sometimes played it during evening events or wedding receptions. Sophia loved to listen when someone played, even if it was just simple songs. She would sit quietly on one of the lobby chairs and close her eyes while the music filled the air around her. Maria knew her daughter was special when it came to music. When Sophia was 6 years old, she would hum complicated songs after hearing them just once. She could pick out melodies on an old keyboard that Maria bought from a thrift store for $10. The keyboard had missing keys and the sound was not great, but Sophia did not seem to mind. She would spend hours playing simple songs and trying to figure out how different notes worked together. Sophia turned 7. Maria learned about a free music program at the community center. The program was for children from families who could not afford private lessons. Sophia started going twice a week, and her teacher, Mrs. Williams, quickly noticed that Sophia had unusual talent. She could learn new songs much faster than other students, and she seemed to understand music in a way that was natural and easy. Mrs. Williams told Maria that Sophia needed better training and more challenging music. She helped Maria apply for a scholarship program at the Eastman School of Music. The school had a special program for gifted children, and they provided free lessons for students who could not pay. Sophia had to audition by playing 3 different pieces and answering questions about music theory. Even though she was nervous, Sophia played beautifully and was accepted into the program. For the past 5 years, Sophia had been taking lessons at Eastman every Saturday morning. Maria would wake up early and take 2 buses to get Sophia to her lesson on time. The lessons were with Dr. Catherine Mills, who was a famous pianist and teacher. Dr. Mills had performed in concert halls around the world and had taught many successful musicians. She saw something very special in Sophia and spent extra time helping her develop her skills. Sophia practiced every day, even though she only had the old keyboard at home. She would do her homework quickly after school and then spend 2 hours working on her music. She learned the pieces by Mozart and Chopin and Beethoven that were much harder than what most kids her age could play. When the keys on the keyboard stopped working, Sophia would practice by moving her fingers in the air and hearing the music in her head. At school, Sophia was quiet and did not talk much about her music lessons. Her classmates did not understand why she spent so much time practicing piano instead of playing games or watching movies. Some kids made fun of her because her mother cleaned hotel rooms and they lived in a small apartment. Sophia learned to keep her musical life separate from school and only shared it with her mother and Dr. Mills. The Grand Windsor Hotel became like a second home for Sophia. She knew all the staff members and they were kind to her. The front desk workers would wave when she walked by, and the restaurant staff sometimes gave her a cookie or a piece of fruit. Sophia was polite and well-behaved and never caused any trouble. She would sit in the break room doing homework or reading books while waiting for her mother to finish work. The hotel lobby fascinated Sophia more than any other place. The high ceilings made sounds echo in interesting ways, and the marble floors created perfect acoustics for music. She noticed how the piano was positioned and how it affected the way sound traveled through the space. During her music lessons, Dr. Mills had taught her about acoustics and how the placement of a piano could change the way it sounded. Sophia often watched when hotel staff moved furniture around for special events. She saw how they struggled to work around the piano when it was in certain positions. She noticed that when the piano was angled one way, the sound carried better to the seating areas, but when it faced another direction, it created dead spots where the music was hard to hear. These observations came naturally to Sophia because music was such an important part of how she understood the world. The hotel hosted many different events throughout the year. There were wedding receptions and business meetings and birthday parties. Sophia had watched dozens of events from the employee break room window that looked out onto the lobby. She saw how different piano positions worked better for different types of gatherings and how the staff had to work harder when the piano was not placed well. On quiet afternoons when no guests were around, Sophia would sometimes walk close to the piano and look at its beautiful design. The wood was polished so well that she could see her reflection in it. The keys were white and black and perfectly aligned. She never touched it because she knew it was expensive hotel property, but she dreamed about what it would feel like to play such a beautiful instrument. Maria was proud of her daughter, but also worried about her future. The music lessons were free, but Sophia would need a better piano to continue developing her skills. College and advanced training would cost money that Maria did not have. She worked extra shifts when possible and saved every dollar she could. But it never seemed like enough to give Sophia all the opportunities she deserved. Dr. Mills had been talking to Maria about Sophia applying to more advanced programs. There were schools like Juilliard that offered full scholarships to exceptional students, but the competition was very tough. Sophia would need to audition against hundreds of other talented young musicians. Dr. Mills believed Sophia had the ability to succeed, but she needed more practice time on a real piano. The old keyboard at home was no longer good enough for the complex pieces Sophia was learning. Her fingers had grown stronger and more precise, but the keyboard could not respond to the subtle ways she touched the keys. Dr. Mills let Sophia practice on the school piano after her lessons, but 1 hour a week was not enough time to master the difficult music she was studying. Sophia understood her family's financial situation and never complained about their limitations. She was grateful for the free lessons and the opportunity to learn from Dr. Mills. She practiced faithfully on the broken keyboard and worked hard to improve her skills despite the challenges. Her determination and positive attitude impressed everyone who knew her, including the hotel staff who watched her grow up in their workplace. The Grand Windsor Hotel piano represented everything Sophia dreamed about in her musical future. It was the kind of instrument that could bring out the full beauty of the pieces she was learning to play. Sometimes she would imagine sitting at that bench and feeling the smooth keys under her fingers while the sound filled the elegant lobby space around her. The Tuesday afternoon started like any other day at the Grand Windsor Hotel, but by 3 o'clock everything began to change in ways that nobody could have predicted. The hotel was preparing for a corporate event that would bring 50 business executives into the main conference room for an important merger discussion. The catering staff had been working since morning to set up tables and arrange the perfect lighting for the presentation. James Patterson had been the head desk clerk at the Grand Windsor for 3 years, and he took his job very seriously. He was 28 years old and always wore perfectly pressed suits with shiny shoes that clicked loudly when he walked across the marble lobby floor. James believed that hotels should run like precise machines where every detail was controlled and every rule was followed exactly. He did not like surprises or changes to the normal routine. That morning James had already dealt with 2 difficult situations that put him in a bad mood. First, a guest complained loudly about the air conditioning in room 412 and demanded a full refund for his 3-night stay. Then the coffee machine in the lobby broke down right when the morning rush of business travelers needed their caffeine fix. James spent 40 minutes on the phone with repair companies trying to find someone who could fix the machine. Immediately, the corporate event was scheduled to begin at 4 o'clock and James wanted everything to be perfect. He had checked the Conference room set up twice and made sure the catering staff understood exactly where to place the food tables and how to arrange the chairs. The event was important for the hotel because the company was considering using the Grand Windsor for their monthly meetings throughout the year. Around 2:30, the catering manager, Tony, approached James with a concern about the lobby setup. The grand piano was positioned in a way that made it difficult for the waiters to carry large trays from the kitchen to the conference room. The pathway was narrow, and the piano bench stuck out just enough to create a problem. Tony suggested moving the piano slightly to open up more space for the staff to work efficiently. James was not happy about this last-minute change, but he understood that the catering staff needed room to do their job properly. He called 2 maintenance workers to help move the heavy piano about 3 feet to the left and angle it differently. The new position still looked elegant in the lobby, but it created a wider walkway for the catering team. James made sure the piano bench was positioned correctly and that the piano was perfectly aligned with the lobby. Furniture. At 3:15, Sophia arrived at the hotel with her backpack full of school books and homework assignments. She had walked the 8 blocks from Jefferson Middle School like she did every day after classes ended. The weather was cool and cloudy, and Sophia was wearing her favorite purple sweater that her mother had bought for her birthday last month. She waved to the front desk staff and headed toward the employee break room, where she would wait for her mother to finish work. As Sophia walked through the lobby, she noticed immediately that the piano had been moved from its usual position. Her musical training with Dr. Mills had taught her to observe how instruments were placed in different spaces and how their positioning affected sound quality and room flow. She could see that while the new position solved the traffic problem, it created acoustic issues that would make the piano sound less beautiful. Sophia had learned about room acoustics during her advanced music theory classes at Eastman. Dr. Mills explained how sound waves bounce off walls and ceilings and how the placement of a piano can make music sound rich and full or thin and weak. The piano was now positioned so that most of the sound would be absorbed by the heavy curtains near the windows instead of reflecting off the marble walls and high ceiling. The corporate guests were beginning to arrive, and Sophia could see them gathering in small groups near the conference room entrance. Some of them were looking at the piano and commenting on its beauty. Sophia realized that if anyone played the piano during or after their meeting, the sound would not carry well through the lobby space. The positioning would waste the natural acoustics that made the Grand Windsor lobby such a special place for music. Sophia looked around to see if any of the hotel staff were nearby, but everyone seemed busy preparing for the event. She knew that her mother was working on the upper floors and would not be back to the lobby for at least an hour. The catering staff were rushing back and forth, carrying supplies and setting up equipment. Nobody appeared to notice the acoustic problem that the piano's new position had created. After thinking about it for several minutes, Sophia decided that she should try to help fix the situation. She had watched the hotel staff move furniture many times, and she understood how the piano could be repositioned to solve both the traffic flow problem and the acoustic issue. The piano just needed to be angled slightly differently so that the sound would reflect properly while still leaving enough room for the catering staff to work. Sophia walked over to the piano and began examining exactly how it was positioned. She could see that if she moved it just a few inches in one direction and turned it slightly, the sound projection would improve dramatically while still maintaining the wide walkway that the catering staff needed. The change would be small, but it would make a big difference in how music sounded in the lobby space. She placed her hands carefully on the side of the piano and began to push it gently. The piano was heavy, but it had wheels on the bottom that made it possible to move with patience and steady pressure. Sophia was careful not to scratch the floor or bump the piano against any furniture. She had seen the maintenance workers move it earlier, and she copied their technique of pushing slowly and steadily. James Patterson was walking back from the conference room where he had been checking on the final setup details when he saw Sophia near the piano. From his position across the lobby, he could not tell exactly what she was doing, but he could see that she had her hands on the expensive instrument. James felt his heart rate increase, and his face began to get hot with anger and frustration. Without Taking time to understand the situation or ask any questions, James stormed across the lobby toward Sophia. His shoes made loud clicking sounds on the marble floor, and several guests turned to look at him as he rushed past them with an angry expression on his face. James was thinking about all the problems he had dealt with that day, and he was not in the mood to handle another situation involving hotel property. When James reached the piano, he was breathing heavily and his voice was much louder than it should have been in the elegant lobby setting. He began shouting at Sophia before she had a chance to explain what she was doing or why she thought the piano needed to be adjusted. His words echoed off the high ceiling and marble walls, making them sound even harsher and more intimidating than he intended. Sophia was completely shocked by the sudden angry confrontation. She had been concentrating on the careful task of adjusting the piano position, and she did not see James approaching until he was standing right next to her shouting. Her hands were still on the piano when he began his angry speech about children not being allowed to touch expensive hotel property without permission. The corporate event guests who had been chatting quietly near the conference room entrance stopped their conversations and turned to watch the scene unfolding in the lobby. Several hotel patrons who were sitting in the comfortable chairs reading newspapers or checking their phones also looked up to see what was causing the commotion. The catering staff paused in their work and stared as James continued his loud criticism of Sophia. Maria was on the 7th floor changing bedsheets in room 718 when she heard echoing voices from the lobby below. The sounds were not clear enough for her to understand the words, but she could tell that someone was upset and speaking very loudly. She did not immediately think that the situation involved her daughter because Sophia was always well behaved and careful to follow all the hotel rules. James was now demanding to know who had given Sophia permission to move hotel furniture and threatening to call security if she did not step away from the piano immediately. His voice carried throughout the lobby and into the adjacent hallways where more hotel staff and guests began to notice the disturbance. Sophia stood frozen next to the piano with tears starting to form in her eyes as the angry man continued shouting at her in front of all these strangers. Maria heard the shouting voices getting louder from the lobby, and something deep in her heart told her that Sophia might be involved in whatever was happening downstairs. She dropped the fresh towels she was carrying and hurried toward the elevator. Her hands were shaking as she pressed the button and waited for what felt like forever for the elevator doors to open. She could still hear the angry voice echoing through the hotel even from 7 floors up. While Maria was rushing to get to the lobby, James Patterson continued his loud criticism of Sophia without giving her any chance to explain what she was doing or why she thought the piano needed to be moved. He was speaking so fast and so angrily that his words were running together and spittle was forming at the corners of his mouth. The more people who stopped to watch the scene, the angrier James became because he felt like his authority at the hotel was being questioned. Sophia tried several times to speak, but James would not let her get a word out before he started shouting again. She wanted to explain about the acoustic problems and how moving the piano just a little bit would make the music sound better while still giving the catering staff room to work. She wanted to tell him that she was trying to help make the hotel event more successful, but James was not interested in hearing anything she had to say. The corporate guests were now openly staring at the confrontation, and some of them were whispering to each other about what they were witnessing. A few of the businessmen looked uncomfortable watching a grown man shout at a young girl in such a public way. One woman in a gray suit pulled out her phone and appeared to be recording the incident, which made James even more flustered and angry than he already was. What nobody in the lobby knew was that Sophia was not just any 12-year-old girl who happened to be curious about the hotel piano. For the past 5 years, she had been studying with Dr. Catherine Mills at the Eastman School of Music under a full scholarship program for gifted children. Sophia had won 3 regional piano competitions and had performed solo pieces with the Rochester Youth Orchestra twice in the past year. Dr. Mills had been working with Sophia on advanced pieces by composers like Chopin and Rachmaninoff that most adult pianists found challenging to master. Sophia could play complex music that required incredible finger strength and coordination, along with deep understanding of musical theory and expression. Her talent was so unusual that Dr. Mills had been encouraging Sophia to audition for even more prestigious programs just 2 weeks earlier. Sophia had received news that would change her entire future, but she had not told anyone at the hotel about it yet. She had been accepted into the pre-college program at the Juilliard School in New York City with a full scholarship that would cover all her tuition and expenses. At 12 years old, Sophia would be one of the youngest students ever admitted to this world-famous music school. The Juilliard acceptance letter was hidden in Sophia's backpack along with her regular school homework. She had been planning to show it to her mother that evening after Maria finished work. Sophia was nervous about telling her mother because she knew that attending Juilliard would mean big changes for their family, including possibly moving to New York or finding a way for Sophia to travel there regularly for classes d'art. Mills had written a special recommendation letter for Sophia's Juilliard application describing her as one of the most naturally gifted young musicians she had encountered in 30 years of teaching. The letter mentioned Sophia's perfect pitch, her ability to memorize complex pieces after hearing them just a few times, and her mature understanding of musical interpretation that was far beyond her chronological age. What made Sophia's musical ability even more remarkable was that she had developed these advanced skills while practicing on a broken keyboard at home and taking lessons just once a week. Most students who reached her level of playing had expensive pianos at home and took multiple lessons every week with additional coaching from other teachers. Sophia had achieved extraordinary results with minimal resources. Because of her natural talent and incredible dedication, the reason Sophia had been so confident about adjusting the piano position was that Dr. Mills had been teaching her about concert hall acoustics and how professional musicians work with sound engineers to optimize instrument placement for different types of performances. Sophia understood the science behind how sound waves travel and reflect in different architectural spaces during her lessons at Eastman. Sophia had practiced in several different rooms and had learned to listen carefully to how the same piece of music sounded different depending on where the piano was positioned and how the room was designed. She could hear subtle differences in tone and resonance that most people would never notice. This knowledge had made her immediately aware of the acoustic problems created by the piano's new position in the hotel lobby at exactly that moment when James was threatening to call hotel security and have Sophia removed from the building. The elevator doors opened and Dr. Catherine Mills stepped out into the lobby. She was at the hotel for a meeting with the general manager about using the Grand Windsor as a venue for an upcoming youth music showcase that would feature the most talented young musicians from the entire region DR. Mills was a distinguished woman in her 50s with silver hair and elegant clothing who commanded respect wherever she went. She had performed as a soloist with major orchestras around the world and had taught hundreds of successful musicians during her career at Eastman. When she walked into rooms, people noticed her presence immediately because she carried herself with the confidence of someone who had dedicated her life to excellence in music. As soon as Dr. Mills saw what was happening in the lobby, she recognized Sophia immediately, even though the young girl was crying and looked very different from the confident student who played so beautifully during their weekly lessons. Dr. Mills could not believe that someone was shouting at one of her most promising students in such a harsh and public way. The scene in the lobby had now attracted the attention of hotel guests from other areas of the building. People were coming out of the restaurant and the gift shop to see what was causing all the commotion. The catering staff had stopped their work completely and were standing around watching the confrontation. Even some of the housekeeping staff had appeared from the service corridors to observe what was happening. Maria finally reached the lobby, just as Dr. Mills was walking toward the group of people gathered around the piano. Maria's face showed a mixture of embarrassment, worry, and protective anger as she saw her daughter being shouted at by the hotel clerk. She hurried across the marble floor as fast as she could while still trying to maintain her dignity in front of all the hotel guests and staff members who were watching. James Patterson was so focused on his angry lecture that he did not notice Dr. Mills approaching until she was standing right next to him. When he finally saw the elegant older woman, he assumed she was just another hotel guest who wanted to complain about the noise and disruption. He was not prepared for what Dr. Mills was about to say or how her presence would completely change the situation. Dr. Mills spoke in a calm but authoritative voice that immediately made everyone in the lobby stop talking and pay attention to her words. She asked James to please stop shouting and to allow Sophia to explain what she had been doing with the piano. Her tone was polite but firm, and it was clear that she was someone who was used to being listened to and respected the atmosphere in. The lobby began to shift as people sensed that this distinguished woman might know something about the situation that would change their understanding of what had been happening. James looked confused and slightly less confident than he had been just moments before. Sophia looked up at Dr. Mills with relief and gratitude in her eyes, knowing that her teacher would help her explain the truth about why she had been adjusting the piano position. Among the crowd that had gathered to watch the confrontation was Rebecca Martinez, a reporter for the local newspaper who had been at the hotel to cover the corporate merger meeting. She had noticed the disruption and had started taking notes about what she was witnessing because she sensed that there might be an interesting human interest story developing in the hotel lobby. Dr. Mills looked directly at James Patterson and spoke in a voice that was gentle but carried the authority of someone who had spent decades teaching and performing music at the highest levels. She asked him to please step back and allow her student to explain what she had been trying to accomplish with the piano. The word student made James pause because he had not expected this elegant woman to have any connection to the young girl he had been shouting at. Sophia wiped the tears from her cheeks and took a deep breath as Dr. Mills encouraged her to tell everyone exactly what she had observed about the piano placement and why she thought it needed to be adjusted. Sophia's voice was quiet at first because she was still shaken from the confrontation, but as she began to explain her reasoning, her confidence started to return. She pointed to the way the piano was currently angled and explained how the sound waves would be absorbed by the heavy curtains instead of reflecting off the marble walls and high ceiling to create the rich, resonant tone that made music sound beautiful in the lobby space. She described how the acoustic properties of the room were being wasted by the current positioning and how a small adjustment would solve both the traffic flow problem and the sound quality issue that corporate guests and hotel patrons who had gathered to watch the scene began to listen more carefully as Sophia demonstrated knowledge about acoustics and sound engineering that most adults did not possess. Her explanation was clear and technical, but she used simple words that everyone could understand. Several people in the crowd looked impressed by the young girl's understanding of complex musical concepts. James Patterson stood with his mouth slightly open as he realized that Sophia was not just randomly moving expensive hotel property, but was actually trying to solve a real problem that he and the catering staff had not even noticed. He began to feel embarrassed about his angry outburst, but he was still not sure who this girl really was, or why she knew so much about piano placement and room acoustics. Dr. Mills smiled proudly as Sophia finished her explanation, and then she addressed the entire group of people who had gathered in the lobby. She introduced herself as a professor at the Eastman School of Music and explained that Sophia had been her student for 5 years, under a scholarship program for exceptionally gifted young musicians. The crowd began to murmur with surprise as they learned that the girl they had just seen being shouted at was actually a serious music student. Maria finally reached the group and stood next to her daughter with her arm around Sophia's shoulders. She looked at Dr. Mills with gratitude for defending Sophia, and then she looked at James with a mixture of hurt and anger in her eyes. Maria had worked at the hotel for 8 years and had never caused any problems, but now her daughter had been humiliated in front of dozens of people. Dr. Mills continued speaking to the gathered crowd and mentioned that Sophia had recently achieved something remarkable that very few young musicians ever accomplished. She paused for dramatic effect and then announced that Sophia had just been accepted into the pre-college program at the Juilliard School in New York City with a full scholarship. The news created a wave of surprised gasps and excited whispers throughout the lobby. The corporate guests who had been watching the confrontation now, looked at Sophia with completely different expressions on their faces. Instead of seeing a troublesome child who was touching expensive hotel property, they now saw a young musical prodigy who had earned admission to one of the most prestigious music schools in the world. Several people began to applaud spontaneously. Rebecca Martinez, the newspaper reporter, moved closer to the group as she realized that she was witnessing a much more interesting story than she had originally thought. She pulled out her notebook and began writing down details about Sophia's background and her recent acceptance to Juilliard. This was exactly the kind of human interest story that her readers would find inspiring and memorable. James Patterson felt, his face turning red with embarrassment as he understood the full scope of his mistake. He had publicly shouted at and threatened a gifted young musician who had been trying to help improve the hotel's event setup. His angry words had been witnessed by important business guests and other hotel patrons who would remember this incident for a long time. Dr. Mills looked at Sophia with encouragement in her eyes and asked her if she would be willing to demonstrate her piano skills for everyone who had gathered in the lobby. She explained that Sophia had been working on some very challenging pieces and that hearing her play would help people understand why she had been accepted to such a competitive music program. Sophia looked around at all the faces staring at her and felt nervous about performing in front of so many strangers, especially after the upsetting confrontation she had just experienced. Her hands were still shaking slightly from the stress of being shouted at, and she was not sure if she could play her best with so many people watching. But Dr. Mills gave her a reassuring nod, and Sophia decided that she wanted to show everyone what she could really do. She walked over to the piano bench and adjusted it to the right height for her smaller frame. The lobby became completely quiet as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Sophia placed her hands on the keys and closed her eyes for a moment to center herself and focus on the music she was about to play. When she opened her eyes, she looked calm and confident, like a completely different person from the frightened girl who had been crying just minutes before. Sophia began to play Chopin's Minute Waltz, a piece that required incredible technical skill and speed along with delicate musical expression. From the very first notes, it was clear that this was not ordinary playing, but something truly exceptional. Her fingers moved across the keys with precision and grace that seemed impossible for someone her age. The sound that came from the piano was rich and beautiful and filled every corner of the elegant lobby space. The melody danced and sparkled under Sophia's touch as she navigated the complex passages that challenged even professional pianists. Her interpretation showed maturity and emotional depth that went far beyond her 12 years. Every note was perfectly placed, and the musical phrases flowed together with natural elegance that could only come from someone with extraordinary talent. The lobby crowd stood in complete silence as Sophia's performance continued. Even the hotel staff, who had been rushing around preparing for the corporate event, stopped their work to listen to the incredible music. The catering workers stood holding their serving trays as they watched the young girl create magic at the piano. The corporate guests forgot about their business meeting as they witnessed something truly special happening before their eyes as Sophia played the final measures of the waltz. The acoustic properties of the lobby space became clearly apparent to everyone listening. The sound reflected off the marble walls and high ceiling, creating layers of resonance that made the music sound even more beautiful and powerful. The piano placement that Sophia had been trying to adjust would have made this performance sound even better, but even in its current position, the results were stunning. When the last note faded away, the lobby remained silent for several seconds as people absorbed what they had just heard. Then the applause began, starting with a few people and quickly building into enthusiastic clapping from everyone present. The corporate guests applauded loudly, and several of them wiped tears from their eyes. The hotel staff joined in the applause, and even James Patterson found himself clapping despite his embarrassment about the situation. Dr. Mills beamed with pride as she watched the crowd's reaction to Sophia's performance. She had heard Sophia play this piece many times during their lessons, but seeing other people experience her students' talent for the first time never got old. The look of joy and accomplishment on Sophia's face as she acknowledged. The applause made all the years of teaching and mentoring worthwhile. The applause continued for almost 2 minutes as everyone in the lobby showed their appreciation for Sophia's incredible performance. She stood up from the piano bench and gave a small bow like Dr. Mills had taught her to do after concerts. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement, and the tears that had been on her face from James Patterson's shouting were now replaced with a bright smile that showed how much she loved sharing her music with other people. James Patterson felt like he wanted to disappear into the marble floor of the lobby. His face was burning with shame as he realized that dozens of people had witnessed him yelling at one of the most talented young musicians in the region. He looked around at the faces of the corporate guests and hotel patrons and saw expressions that ranged from disappointment to disgust. Several people were shaking their heads and whispering to each other about his behavior. Mr. Rodriguez, the hotel general manager, had heard about the commotion in the lobby and came rushing down from his office on the second floor. When he arrived, he saw the crowd of people still clapping for Sophia, and he immediately understood that something very significant had just happened. He spotted James standing off to the side looking miserable, and he quickly walked over to get an explanation of what had occurred. Rebecca Martinez, the newspaper reporter, was busy writing notes and trying to get quotes from people who had witnessed both the confrontation and the piano performance. She approached Dr. Mills and asked for more details about Sophia's musical background and her acceptance to Juilliard. Dr. Mills was happy to talk about her exceptional student, and she provided information that would make an excellent feature story for the local paper. One of the corporate executives, a woman named Susan Chun, who was visiting from Chicago, walked up to Sophia and Maria to express her amazement at the performance. She told them that she had season tickets to the Chicago Symphony Orchestra and had heard many professional pianists, but Sophia's playing was truly remarkable for someone so young. She asked Sophia about her plans for studying at Juilliard and her dreams for the future. Maria was overwhelmed by all the positive attention that Sophia was receiving after the frightening incident with James Patterson. She had been so worried about her daughter getting in trouble at the hotel where she worked, but now everyone was treating Sophia like a celebrity. Maria felt proud and grateful, but also concerned about how this situation might affect her job security. Dr. Mills took charge of the situation and asked everyone to give Sophia and Maria some space to recover from the emotional stress of the confrontation. She suggested that people who wanted to learn more about Sophia's musical journey could read about it in the newspaper article that Rebecca Martinez was planning to write. The crowd began to disperse as people returned to their original activities, but many of them continued talking excitedly about what they had witnessed. Mr. Rodriguez approached Maria and Sophia with a very serious expression on his face. Maria feared that he was going to blame her for the disruption and possibly fire her for allowing her daughter to touch the expensive hotel piano. Instead, Mr. Rodriguez apologized profusely for James Patterson's inappropriate behavior and assured Maria that the hotel valued her as an employee and welcomed Sophia as always, then did something that surprised everyone present, including James Patterson himself. Mr. Rodriguez announced that James would be required to make a formal written apology to both Sophia and Maria, and that he would be suspended from his position for 1 week without pay to think about his actions. He explained that the Grand Windsor Hotel prided itself on treating all people with respect and dignity regardless of their age or social status. James knew that he deserved the punishment, and he approached Sophia and Maria to offer his sincere apology. His voice was quiet and humble as he told them how sorry he was for his outburst and his failure to listen to Sophia's explanation before jumping to conclusions. He admitted that he had been having a stressful day, but that was no excuse for treating a young person so poorly. Sophia surprised everyone by accepting James's apology graciously and telling him that she understood how busy and stressful hotel work could be. Her mature response to the situation impressed all the adults who were listening and showed the kind of character that had helped her succeed in her musical studies despite facing many challenges in her young life. Dr. Mills suggested that this incident could actually lead to something positive for everyone involved. She proposed that the hotel consider hosting regular musical performances in the lobby, featuring talented young musicians from the local area. The acoustic properties of the space were excellent for piano music, and it would give students valuable performance experience while providing entertainment for hotel guests. Mr. Rodriguez was very interested in this idea and asked Dr. Mills to work with him to develop a plan for monthly concerts in the hotel lobby. He thought that featuring young musical talent would create a unique atmosphere that would distinguish the Grand Windsor from other hotels in the city. He also offered to have the piano moved to the optimal position that Sophia had been trying to achieve. Rebecca Martinez published her article about Sophia and the hotel incident 3 days later on the front page of the Arts and Entertainment section. The story included photos of Sophia at the piano and quotes from Dr. Mills about her students' exceptional talent and bright future. The article also mentioned Sophia's acceptance to Juilliard and her mother's dedication to supporting her daughter's musical education while working as a hotel housekeeper. The newspaper story attracted attention from other media outlets, and within a week, Sophia had been invited to perform on a local television morning show and a regional radio program. The publicity helped raise awareness about the scholarship programs that made it possible for talented young people from modest backgrounds to receive excellent musical training. Several wealthy individuals who read the newspaper article contacted Dr. Mills to ask about making donations to support Sophia's education and other young musicians in similar situations. A local business owner offered to provide Sophia with a high-quality digital piano for practice at home since her old keyboard was no longer adequate for the advanced pieces she was learning. The corporate executives who had witnessed the lobby incident were so impressed with Sophia's performance that they decided to make the Grand Windsor Hotel their regular meeting venue. They specifically requested that their future meetings be scheduled on days when Sophia might be available to perform for their group. This additional business was valuable for the hotel and helped justify Mr. Rodriguez's decision to start the monthly concert series. Sophia's first official performance in the hotel lobby was scheduled for the following month, and tickets were made available to the public, with all proceeds going to support music education scholarships for other deserving students. The concert sold out within 2 days of being announced, and people were calling the hotel asking to be put on a waiting list for future performances. James Patterson returned to work after his suspension with a completely different attitude toward his job and his interactions with hotel guests and staff. The incident with Sophia had taught him an important lesson about making assumptions and treating people with respect. He became one of Sophia's biggest supporters at the hotel and always made sure that the piano was positioned correctly for her performances. Maria received a promotion to head housekeeper just 2 months after the lobby incident. Mr. Rodriguez told her that her years of dedicated service and her daughter's positive influence on the hotel's reputation made her the obvious choice for the leadership position. The promotion came with a significant salary increase that would help support Sophia's musical education. Sophia continued her weekly lessons with Dr. Mills while preparing for her transition to the Juilliard pre-college program. She practiced on the hotel piano twice a week with Mr. Rodriguez's permission, and she often drew small audiences of hotel guests who happened to be in the lobby during her practice sessions. The Grand Windsor became known throughout the city as a place where visitors might hear beautiful music performed by an exceptionally talented young artist. Incident that began with a misunderstanding and harsh words ended up changing the lives of everyone involved in positive and lasting ways. Sophia's talent had been revealed to a wider audience. James had learned valuable lessons about respect and assumptions. Maria had advanced in her career, and the hotel had gained a reputation for supporting young artists and creating special experiences for their guests.